61 Moons, Chapter 1.
Absence. Even in 2043, the humble answering app can't do much to assist or ease the frustration of an impatient caller. Audio researchers have worked on the timing and pitch of the beep. Linguists have worked on the language of each automated voice. Voice actors have worked on real and welcoming alternatives to synthetic tones. Marketing specialists and business analysts have pulled out their hair trying to solve this particular conundrum. Meetings, flowcharts, diagrams, and a whole lexicon of increasingly ridiculous terminology. Papers, theories, books, tutorials, pretty much all a complete and utter waste of time and money, once you consider the nature of the real issue. Absence. This particular evening, the owner of this particular answering app lay strewn on a made bed, fully clothed and sleeping like a baby. He's in a hotel room he didn't pay for. 3 other men are also sleeping in the room, scattered like on fashionable cushions. There's a heady smell of alcohol in the air, and the night sky fills the large glass windows enclosing one side of the room. Rain gently falls to the rhythm of a resonant, synchronized nasal chorus. The passive sensors for electric light have all but given up on any chance of movement in the room. The pulse of a single bright red light, blinking every second, remains the only artificial light. The source? An LED attached to the top of a cell phone, abandoned on the bed next to the head of its sleeping owner. 3 missed calls have been logged, the last instance with an attached recording. Jack, call me please. I realize it's late, but really? Where the hell are you? Gentle breathing and global rotation pass away 30 minutes until the answering machine chirps up again to an increasingly frustrated caller. Hi, Jack isn't available right now. According to his schedule, he should be on his way to Mission HQ, though proximity sensors indicate he hasn't moved for 2 hours and 35 minutes, 13 seconds. The caller's heartbeat and breathing rate quickened. Sensing this, the machine responded. Please, don't be alarmed. Jack appears to have been sleeping for the duration. If you'd like to leave a message for Jack, please do so after the tone. Jack, you'd better wake up sooner. Your ass will be leaving for Saturn before you do. Carter has been trying to find you and he sounds angry, even more than I am. Call me soon. It's 3 a.m. and you're leaving tomorrow. Your son would like to see you before you go, please. Bob Kramer was at 18 years old the baby of the group and a very light sleeper. A bright, concentrated beam of light glanced quickly over his youthful face and among the floor, up the wall and out. Bob twitched like a feather had just passed across his face. A minute passed. The light returned back along and down the wall, the floor, onto his face and paused like an evil child torturing an insect with a magnifying glass on a sunny day. Bob immediately went into a spasm, an improbable dance which unskillfully ended in an upright sitting position. He raised an arm to protect his eyes. He squinted at the bright light, cursing it and trying to figure out what it wanted from him. Bam! He sobered up in an instant and jumped to his feet in realization, tripping over a small coffee table, kicking beer bottles, and launching playing cards into the air. The other 3 men slipped out of sleep with much less enthusiasm. Annoyed by the commotion and the jarringly binary nature of light and sound in their present, an external spotlight combined with all of the lights in the room having just turned themselves on due to rapid motion detection. Not exactly a magic bullet for a peaceful rise. Jack, the last to respond, simply opened one eye to glare across at his cell phone's light show and wondered what the hell kind of alarm he'd set. The 4 cell phones in the room, the screen on the back of Bob's old-fashioned camera, the TV and the room service screen all lit up with a not-so-welcome face, the face of Carter. You clowns better have a good reason as to why you're not on your way to HQ already. I'll take particular interest in seeing you each individually do your cardio prep and ensure you're purged of any unwanted chemicals or unsavory ideas. The spotlight outside the window panned away, revealing its source. The outline of a small helicopter barely visible in the dark, starry sky. It silently gained height, turned, revealing a large metallic H logo behind the door, and slid silently out of sight. Carter completed his smackdown. You'd better make it here, or there'll be hell to pay. And William, next time you book a room to duck my radar, Try using a false name and ease up on the schnapps, cowboy." 3 heavy pillows struck Will's throbbing cranium in quick succession as he warily sat up. All he could muster in reaction was a squeaky-sounding, "Hey." He hated being called cowboy. 4 extraordinary guys doing something very ordinary, getting drunk together and playing cards, what may be one last time. Each man tomorrow would be fired from terra firma into space, near then far. Saturn's 61 moons had become rich pickings for their employer, minerals and metalloids to feed the silicon junkies. Jack poked and prodded at his cell phone until it gave finally in and played back his long queue of messages. He habitually listened to the first and last only. The first and last were from Susan. Nobody knows a husband's bad habits better than his wife. Carter had nothing on the kinds of compelling motivational forces that woman could muster. Last goodbyes. 4 astronauts drifting towards Jack's house in the early hours, each privately wondering why they'd not simply stayed there in the first place rather than spending company money on a hotel room just to play cards and get drunk. It had been a team effort in almost every sense, all but the sharp and spiny common sense, which Carter had stabbed them in the butt with an hour ago. Will had suggested the card game, Jack the Alcohol, but Bob's untempered youthful spirit of adventure had somehow snuck under everyone's sensible radar. Even Clarence joined in, suggesting they should go a little further afield in order to avoid being detected by a mosquito cam. It seemed like a great way to go, the words there, back, before they realized were overly used in excited sentences. In matter of fact, before they knew it, they were stealing a company helicopter and heading for the most expensive hotel in the neighboring city. Good schnapps, a helipad, long-legged dancers, and network anonymity. It had all the stealth and subtlety of a moose in a tutu, and yet they still all buckled up for the ride. On careful reflection, Jack let out a sigh. His mind finally drifted away from last night and floated into the path of other things high on the horizon. Awkward things he didn't want to think about, and irritating things like the excessively noisy helicopter. He muttered a rant about how even modern helicopters are noisy to the travelers inside, most of the silencing technology concentrated on making them quieter on the outside. But then most of the money to fund research into this technology came from public funds, so that kind of makes sense. Nobody heard him, so he mentally noted how Will was a smoother pilot when suppressed by the numbing effects of a hangover. Will responded spookily on the pilot's PA. "Hope you guys are having a nice ride. Not too bumpy for you, Jack. ETA about 3 minutes." Jack hated the sound of the PA and the way it distorted. Sometimes being an audio nerd got in the way of his natural thought rhythms and patterns. He was always being distracted by the detail. Whilst Rome burnt to a crisp, he'd be the guy frustrated by the cracking sound being unrealistically overly fire-like. He looked down on the city below from his co-pilot seat. So many lights, so many homes, so many silicon junkies with energy to burn. He could see surprisingly well through the glass floor, even between his boots silhouetted against all those burning electrons. He returned to fiddling with his cell phone, which annoyingly refused to do anything, other than warn him of increasingly close proximity of oncoming speedy objects. It kept asking, "Are you flying?" Yes to engage flight mode. Jack kept pressing no because he wanted to access his first and last voice message again. He knew voice messages are blocked in flight mode. "Are you flying?" "No." Warning. Possible fatal collision in 10. Meantime, the two men in the back glanced across at each other and nodded toward the headsets hung from magnetic hooks above their heads. Noise cancellation software made a half-decent job of bringing cabin noise to a civilized level. After the briefest moment, Bob spoke first. "Guys, that was a dumb idea. We should have just risked being caught at Jack's place. Though the last time we did that, it backfired too, I guess." Bob's present demeanor was his often curious combination of enthusiasm and bafflement. Bob sat directly behind Jack, and there was no way for Jack to see his face without turning awkwardly. Yet, as Jack continued to battle with his mobile tech, he could picture Bob's expression perfectly well. When he'd first met Bob on an induction day, Jack had been roped into mentoring the new recruits. Every task, Bill would dive into enthusiastically, and at some point would adopt that same demeanor. The first time Jack witnessed it, he was instantly reminded of his childhood pet dog Rufus. A wonderful dog, but a slightly crazy dog. Rufus used to chew all kinds of things, but mostly he'd seek and destroy Jack's freshly purchased tennis balls. He didn't bother with the old ones, they had to be new. He'd seek them out with gusto, find them, and rip them to shreds. Excitement, exhilaration, realization. Eventually Jack grew tired of the game. Those balls were expensive. So he took a new pack and marinated them in lemon juice. Rufus was crazy, not stupid, so he didn't immediately fall for the ruse. Jack got to play with one ball from the tube. Having figured these balls were clearly the real deal, if a little pungent, Rufus dived right in. Jack and his friend Tim stopped their game to watch. Excitement, exhilaration, realization, confusion, alarm, ears pinned back, lemon tang-induced thirst, tongue-twisting, never-quenching thirst, until finally the lemon subsided, the bafflement did not ever. Tennis balls thereafter, lemony evil. Will drawled. "Dumb idea, Bob. Well, that may be. Let's just deal with the situation we have right now. Well done, you guys, finally working out the headsets make for a more pleasant flight. How many times have I told you guys about it? Plenty. Do you listen? No. Anyways, so Carter wants to slip his tongue in our ear. Nothing new about that. Jack's just lost $2,000. Nothing new about that neither. I suggest we just go say so long to the girls and get with the program. Bob needs to sober up and Jack needs this trip to pay me back." "You said so long to plenty of girls last night, Will," chipped in Bob enthusiastically. "And you know the card games aren't for real. Stop trying to make them into something they ain't." Will twisted around and glanced back at Bob sternly. "Look, Sonny." Then stopped, silenced by the press of a hand on his shoulder. The hand was exceptionally large and heavy, as was its owner, Clarence. Clarence didn't say much, but when he did, people took notice. If a mountain could talk, it would sound like Clarence. "Let's just forget that shit. What happened yesterday stays in yesterday. Today requires us to be focused and work as a team, together." The mountain had spoken. Meantime, the terrain outside grew ever closer as Will eased toward the darkened outline of the woods and fields surrounding Jack's place. The launch site wasn't quite visible, but seemed obviously looming to those who cared to think about it. Jack didn't. He also didn't hear any of the conversation the other three were having, but he followed it all on his cell phone whilst in flight mode. Audio-to-text translation did a reasonable job, even with Will's southern edge. It translated the prollies and the nothings, once he'd taught it to. Jack used it cautiously anyway, as it occasionally threw in a little conversational spice. Jack's wife, Susan, had recently purchased a new coat, and excitedly called Jack about it, leaving a message. "Just bought a new goat. See you when you get home." He couldn't resist asking if she was kidding later that night. Traveling in a helicopter draws almost as much unwanted attention as shopping for or with a goat. Slowly, they descended towards Jack's farmhouse. Lots of cars and exactly no goats. Will brought the copter to the ground gently, in the larger of the three fields, to the back of the property. "Wouldn't want to wake the kids," he giggled. Jack spat. "Wake the kids? This thing could wake the dead. My old dog Rufus is buried in this field over there in Wainwright's Corner. Have some respect." The not-so-fantastic four walked towards Jack's front door, squabbling amongst themselves in whispers. They argued about last night. They argued about the suitability of their respective footwear. They agreed on one thing only, to stealthily walk along the grass and avoid the popcorn crunch of the gravel driveway. Finally, a good idea. With little time to congratulate themselves, they arrived at the front porch, at which point they all simultaneously remembered why they opted for that out-of-town hotel. Jack's large, wooden front door automatically opened slow and wide, as if to assist them creeping inside. Susan didn't wait for dramatic effect. She impatiently launched the first of her verbal attacks. "What the hell are you guys playing at? Are you all 8 years old? Do you know what time it is? Arriving in a helicopter at 4 a.m. is totally unacceptable, and look at the state of you." As if Susan's angry disposition alone wasn't enough to block the doorway, she was flanked by the wives and girlfriend of the other 3 rejects. Their faces, just like Susan's, thunderous and stressed. A moment passed as the 4 men paused for the right moment to speak, allowing for the exchange of death stares, cooling tempers, and the calming of pulses. Subconsciously, using one of the benefits of Carter's training regime, dealing with high pressure and unpredictable situations. Will was the first to speak. "Now y'all..." Unpredictably, Jack Jr. shot through the legs of the defensive line, blocking the doorway, and jumped into the receiving arms of his father. Jack gave him a squeeze and whispered in his ear, "This is the last time, son, I promise."